really gorgeous outside. I stepped outside for just a couple minutes, and it's killing me that I'm not outside cleaning up with my garden, because I gotta clean up my garden. We're gonna talk a little bit about a lot of things with butterflies today. Just to introduce myself a little bit, I'm a Lake County Master Gardener. This is my 20th year as a Lake County Master Gardener, and I'm also a professional horticulturist and a certified arborist. And I work in a park district in Illinois. So been doing speaking engagements for 20 years, and my focus is pollinators and butterflies. And today we're going to talk a lot about monarch butterflies, because that's my real love, my focus. I raise monarch butterflies every year for education, and I love to share releasing butterflies with everybody. And so this summer, with all of the festivals and meetings and getting together with people, since everything has been canceled, it's been killing me because I haven't been able to release any butterflies with anybody. I've been doing it all by myself all summer. So I'll be talking mostly about butterfly gardening from the monarch butterfly point of view, but most of the elements of butterfly gardening that I will be talking about will also be applicable to all other butterfly species and bees and hummingbirds. There's a lot of crossover with the three. So let's get started. The first thing I always ask is myself and everybody else is, how can we help butterflies? There's 4 real specific ways that we can help butterflies. The first way is to start planting for butterflies in our own home gardens, and then making a habitat in your garden for butterflies, which are 2 different things. Making a habitat is sort of like an expansion of your garden, enhancing your garden to make it even more enticing for butterflies. And then getting out there and sharing what you know about butterflies and butterfly gardening, and then getting involved with planting community butterfly gardens, whether that be at a local school, a church, in town, on some kind of public property, in a park somewhere, volunteer to take care of a garden, and that kind of thing. I think the more that we as gardeners can get out there and share this, the more people who aren't aware of it are going to be able to then take it on as a project, embrace it, and then they can share it. And I've already even seen that just in the last 20 years of my getting out there and sharing and educating, that there are just tons of people out there who have monarch gardens and who are raising monarchs and sharing and getting out there and educating like I do. So it's been very, very nice to see that snowball effect with my butterfly experience. So that's a few things that you can do. So those are really, really basic things. And I've got a few other things that we can do for butterflies at the end. And I'm hoping to have time for it because I get long-winded. So the first thing I'd like to introduce to you is your high school biology course in 10 minutes. We're going to talk about the life cycle of the monarch butterfly. The life cycle of this butterfly is basically the same as all other butterflies and moths. Meaning that it is a complete life cycle. There are 4 steps to this life cycle, but the monarch butterfly life cycle is a little bit faster than other butterflies that are the same size. So the whole life cycle from egg to wing, is what we say, is about 21 days. It depends on the temperature. So for the egg stage, which is up in the top right-hand corner of your screen, that's about 3 to 5 days. And again, it's dependent on the temperature. If you're leaving your eggs outside in your garden and it's in the 90s, those eggs actually could die. But if it's in the 80s and below about 93, 92 degrees, then they're going to hatch well. Over 92 degrees, the butterflies tend to stop laying eggs. They will move on to another region, which is exactly what happened this summer when we had our drought and our very, very hot weather at the end of July, beginning of August. They just kind of vacated. And I was I was not collecting any eggs, and I wasn't aware of anyone else collecting eggs or seeing eggs and caterpillars in their gardens. The inset photo there with the penny, that's a penny that was minted in Denver. So that little marking on the penny is a D that denotes it from Denver. And that is how small monarch eggs are. They're extremely tiny. The egg on the top of the photo with the shadow in it, that black shadow, that is an egg that is about to hatch. And below it is an egg that has been freshly laid. So they do make some changes while they are inside the egg. And then when they come out of the egg, usually their first meal is their eggshell. It's a very good source of protein. It gives that caterpillar a little bit of boost on its way to growing. Now, the way a caterpillar works is they will molt 4 times during their time as a caterpillar, during the larval stage of the butterfly's development. And that's every couple of days. They're going to molt their skin every couple of days. And so we call the time in between an instar. And so what we have in the picture below the eggs is a 1-day-old caterpillar next to a piece of white rice. They're very, very tiny. It looks like a tiny piece of thread. It's about 0.5 millimeter long and very, very, very thin, tiny. And then below it in the picture with the big caterpillar, that's a caterpillar in the 5th instar, and that caterpillar is about to make a chrysalis. And that caterpillar is eating a seed pod of the common milkweed plant, and they do eat seed pods. It's pretty cool when they eat a seed pod, they kind of eat the whole outside, and then they'll dive in on the inside too, and start to eat the inside of the casing. From inside out. It's kind of neat to watch them do that. It takes them a few days to do it. After the caterpillars have grown and they've eaten and they've gone through their 4 moltings over a 2-week period, then they are going to attach themselves to, if they're outside, they're going to walk away from their milkweed. So if you have common milkweed in your garden or swamp milkweed in your garden, and you've seen some really beautiful fat caterpillars on them, and then all of a sudden they're gone and you think something has come and eaten them, fear not. First of all, birds don't eat monarchs because they're poisonous to them. Second of all, they're really kind of too big for many insects to eat them at that stage, although a stink bug will try. Praying mantises have more of a taste for the full-grown butterfly, so those are at risk when they when they eat clothes out of the chrysalis. When you see them on your milkweed and then they're huge and they're fat and they disappear, usually what happens is they're walking away from the milkweed and they're trying to find some place other than the milkweed to make their chrysalis. Now that doesn't mean that they won't make a chrysalis on the underside of a milkweed leaf, because they will, because I've seen it. I found one the other day at work. And if it's in your home garden, if you're looking for chrysalids, look under your patio table, look on the legs of your patio chairs, look on the underside of the rim of flower pots. My brother usually finds his on the underside of his 2nd floor windowsill of his daughter's bedroom, because his milkweed is right below that window. And so they will climb that, whatever it is, 20, 22 feet up along the brick wall, up to that little ledge, and then that's where they make their chrysalis. So they can walk up to 100 feet or so away from the milkweed. And the reason why they do that is because they know that there are predators that are looking for them on the milkweed when they're in the chrysalis stage, when they're really vulnerable when they're in the chrysalis. So they will walk away, mostly for safety. And they will do what we say, we call it making a button. If you can see on the photo and the bottom in the center, there is a little thick dot of silk that caterpillar has made. And that little thick dot of silk is what we call the button. And the caterpillar is going to attach itself to that with a structure called a cremaster. It comes out of their body as they hang there and wiggle around as they are shedding their skin for the last time. So when a butterfly caterpillar is going into the chrysalis stage, when they're pupating, they are not spinning a cocoon. They are not spinning a chrysalis. They are shedding their skin. They're molting for the last time, the 5th time, and they are revealing their chrysalis. So that's kind of how that goes. So you can see in that picture that the caterpillar's skin kind of splits, and then it moves its way up the chrysalis as the caterpillar is wiggling, and up at the top, it's gonna gather up at the top, and then it'll just fall off. So you'll see it down below it somewhere. If you're outside, or if you're raising them inside, you'll see them on the bottom of the structure that you have them in. The photograph next to that is a chrysalis that has been just formed. It's hardened. It is ready to stay there safely for the next 14 to 17 days and do its thing on the inside. The one next to it, you can just barely see that this chrysalis has turned clear, and you can see the wings of the monarch butterfly through the chrysalis. So that's really, it's a beautiful thing to actually see in person. And when you see the chrysalis turn clear and you can see the wings through the chrysalis, you know that they are going to come out, they're going to eclose and imminently. So within a couple of hours. The photo above it is a monarch butterfly coming out of the chrysalis. They hatch upside down, and then they have to attach themselves to the bottom of a leaf, a stem. In this case, this butterfly is hanging on the underside of the top of the butterfly house that I have, that I sometimes put, I put big caterpillars in this butterfly house. They make their chrysalis. They're nice and safe in there, and then they can come out of the chrysalis and they can dry their wings. Takes them about 5 hours to dry their wings and be ready to fly. And then in my case, I release them. I try to release them the same day that they come out of their chrysalis. I really don't believe in keeping butterflies as pets. I raise these butterflies. I might keep them overnight to take with me to share at an event, but I don't like the idea of keeping a butterfly as a pet. So you guys can tell me in the chat how you feel about that. But I think it's important for people to be able to see all stages of this up close, because once they see it in person, they really will start to take some ownership of it and appreciate it and care a little bit more, for lack of a better word. So what we have here is the annual life cycle of the monarch butterflies from the perspective of our latitude, from the Midwest. We are at latitude 49 degrees north. And this is our schedule. So if we pick up the schedule of the life cycle in September, where we're at, you can see that the migration and the breeding are kind of overlapping. In fact, the breeding is winding down to a trickle right now, and the migration is ramping up. So the butterflies are mostly leaving. They're mostly gone, actually. But there are a lot of butterflies that are still north of us. There's a lot of butterflies that are still in Canada. They're making their way down here. There's butterflies that are flying from Canada and the northern part of Michigan down the coast of Lake Michigan. There is a roost right now at the museum campus in Chicago. And last weekend there was a roost at Lurie Garden. So the roost will stay for 1 to 3 days depending on the weather. So those are kind of cool places to go see. And the reason why those roosts are there is because the butterflies flew down the coast of the lake. It's kind of neat. They will fly across the lake. They will fly across the Gulf of Mexico too, just as a fun fact. We'll talk about that in a minute, a little bit more. So as the migration progresses at this time of the year, it takes the butterflies one generation. So the butterflies that are eclosing up here in the Midwest, they are the butterflies that are flying for 2 months down to central Mexico, to the state of Michoacan, in the mountains down there, and they will stay all winter long. So by the time Halloween comes for us, most of the butterflies are there. They will trickle in for the first week of November, and then by that time, they're all there. And they will hang out in the OML fir trees on the mountain. There's 11 sites in this mountain range where there are overwintering spots for the monarch butterflies. And only I believe only 3 are open to the public. I've visited 2, and it's a really life-changing experience. When January and February come around, the weather is changing towards mid-February. I was there in the 3rd week of February. The weather was warm, it was sunny, it had been dry for a while. It was really ideal weather to go see the butterflies up in the sanctuaries. So by the end of February, the butterflies are starting to mate there in Mexico, and the females are flying up north on a northeast trajectory to Texas, and that's the first place that they go when they lay eggs, is usually southern Texas, mid-Texas. And then it will take them 3 generations to make their way back up to Chicago and beyond. So when the butterflies, you can see here that the green part of the bar starts for us somewhere in mid-May. So about the 3rd week of May is when we see them for the first time. Every once in a while, we will have butterflies on the 2nd week of May or the 1st week of May. 3 years ago, I was raising butterflies on May 2nd. It was a very strange year. But most of the time, we are looking for the butterflies to be hanging out in our gardens and breeding in our gardens from June, July, and August through the 3rd week of August. And then it kind of wanes. And so that will be part of the 3rd generation will be born here, and a lot of the 4th generation of the monarch will be born here in our area and north of us. And then that 4th generation is the generation that is going to turn around and go right back to Mexico. Make sure if you have any questions about this that you type them in the chat so we don't miss them. So here's a map of how the migration looks. Right now, the butterflies are in that big gold funnel, and they are making their way down to central Mexico where that blue dot says winter. Most of the butterflies that are born in the Corn Belt. So that's why there has been such a push for education on growing milkweed and raising gardens and adding habitat all over the Midwest. It's actually been quite a big movement. And they do get up to places like Vermont. My cousin has a house in Vermont and said that they saw a roost of butterflies there a couple of weeks ago, which is kind of rare actually for Vermont. So when they come to Mexico for the winter, they are taking many routes, and they are ending up into one route and funneling down into Mexico, into the mountains. But you can see the green arrows are the spring migration arrows, and those arrows show that the butterflies split off. Nobody knows why certain butterflies go in certain directions, but there is a theory that the butterflies will go where their previous generations actually came from. So the butterflies that are born in Chicago will have other butterflies that are coming back to Chicago because their great-great-great-grandparents were the butterflies that were born in Chicago. So it's a theory that is very, very difficult to prove. No one's been able to prove it, but I think it's kind of an interesting theory. So I feel like a lot of people who have butterfly gardens, they will say, just like Jim said earlier, when you and Ginger were chatting, you said that, you don't see very many butterflies in your garden. And I find that people will start a butterfly garden and have it for a while and not see a lot of butterflies, and then all of a sudden they find them. And then you always have butterflies year after year after year, and that could be one of the reasons why. It's one of those things, like, you just really have to entice them with the right plants to get them in there, and then they will keep coming back. And it seems like generation after generation they come back. So these are a couple of my photographs from my trip to Mexico. I usually have a short video here, but it's very difficult over Zoom to actually see it. So these are just photos. These trees in this photo are OML fir trees. They're enormous. They're absolutely enormous. They're like 150 to 200 feet tall. They're so tall you can barely see the tops. But you can see how on the trees, on the foliage on the trees, they look very thick. those are all clusters of butterflies. And some of those clusters, like in the very, very center of your screen, you're going to see a very thick cluster. That cluster could be 5,000 butterflies. And the most beautiful thing about visiting at the time of the year that we went and visited was that, and I had just had knee replacement surgery a year ago, so I wasn't moving up that mountain very fast. So I was the last one in line, and I sat for about 40 minutes, and I just sat and watched the butterflies. And every time a ray of sunshine came down through the canopy and hit a cluster of butterflies, the cluster would break up, and the butterflies would just float away and start flying around because they warm up. The sunshine warms them up. Almost, it must be almost instantly. It gets them flying. And that was an amazing thing. And when we all got back on the bus, and I said to everybody, did you guys see the clusters breaking up? Did you see how the sun hit the clusters? And nobody else saw it because nobody else sat down and took a rest. I was the only one. So if you ever have a chance to go down there, I suggest, and I would encourage you to go. It's such a beautiful trip. And we went with a tour group. And so it was very safe. A lot of fun. It was nice to be able to see the whole life cycle then, because I knew that there were a couple of my butterflies in there somewhere, tagged. So why is the Midwest so important? Why are all the education organizations out there pushing for the Midwest? Well, it's because 38% of our butterflies that go to Mexico every winter come from the Midwest, because in the times before farming, that is where all of the milkweed was concentrated. We do have milkweed all across the North American continent, all the way down from central Mexico, all the way through up to Canada, into the mountains in Canada, kind of east of the mountains. There's no milkweed that really appears in the Rocky Mountains, but we have milkweed anywhere where it's warm, it's moist, it can be slightly forested, prairie land, marshland. There are 110 milkweed species. And so most of that was in the Corn Belt, what we call the Corn Belt now. Previously, before the Corn Belt, it was prairie land. And so the butterflies still go up to that region looking for the milkweed. So we have had a lot of planting encouraged down there in the Midwest. This is a photo of two of my butterflies from a couple of years ago. This is a summer butterfly on the left, and on the right is a migration butterfly. The migration butterflies are about 30% larger than the summer butterflies, and it always intrigues me how long their wings are, because they have to fly about 2,500 miles from here to central Mexico. So it's a long trip, takes them 2 months, and along that route, all the way down to Mexico, they have to really fatten up. So they have to have the right food to be able to put on about 50% of their weight. To Mexico, they don't eat very much. I'm not going to say they don't eat at all, because when we were there were wildflowers all over the mountains where we were at, and there were butterflies feeding all over the place. So at certain times of the year, maybe they don't eat, maybe in the coldest parts of the winter. It's not very cold there in Mexico, but when we were there, they were feeding aplenty. The status of the monarch population changes every year. This chart has been added on to by Monarch Watch every year since 94, 95. And we had a very large dip in the population from 2019 to this winter. So it was sad to see that dip in the population, but that doesn't mean that things are dire with the monarch butterfly, but things are not so dire that we can't turn it around. That's what I'm trying to say. So the colonies are measured in hectares, and what they do is they walk, the park rangers down there and the World Wildlife Federation staff goes down there, Monarch Watch goes there. They walk around the whole perimeter of areas on foot, looking up into the trees and they mark out where the edge of the trees are that the butterflies are roosting in, because it doesn't change very much from day to day, especially in late December and early January when they're doing this counting. And they also do estimations of the population from the air, from airplanes. They fly over. And I'm sure at some point they're going to start using drones. I keep trying to see if someone has gotten some drone footage of the sanctuaries, because I think that that would be really fascinating. And if you Google hummingbird, like a robotic hummingbird in the monarch sanctuaries, someone has built a tiny little robotic hummingbird that has a camera on it, and they got a lot of really interesting footage up in the colonies, up in the trees, like 100 feet up in the trees, by using this little tiny robotic hummingbird that, you know, just looks like a hummingbird, and the butterflies weren't bothered by it at all. So it's really cool to watch. Butterfly eggs are very, very tiny. I just want to stress that to you if you ever do go looking for them. This is a monarch egg, and that is my thumbnail in the forefront of that photo. So they're really tiny, but once you start looking for them, if you want to, I never tell people to go out and raise butterflies. If you feel like nature needs to take its course and you're just going to provide the habitat, that's just fine. That is just fine. You're not doing anything wrong. You're helping every time you put in a plant for the monarchs, you're helping them. So, but just so you know what the eggs look like, because you should be monitoring your garden to see if you're actually getting eggs. Butterflies and caterpillars have two very, very different bodies, even though genetically they're the same organism. Caterpillars have chewing mouth parts. They have 6 legs, just like the butterflies, except that they have 8 extra little feet in the back that are like suction cups. They have 2 sets of what most people would call antennae, but we really call them tentacles because they don't function like antennae. Antennae are very specific, very sophisticated sensory organs, and tentacles just kind of tell the caterpillars if they're next to another caterpillar or not. Their eyes can see light and dark on the caterpillars. They can tell daylight from nighttime. They can't really see anything else though. Both the caterpillar and the butterfly do not have lungs, but they do breathe through these little organelles on the sides of their bodies called spiracles. You can kind of see one on the caterpillar right next to its first foot. It looks like a little circle on that black stripe. Butterflies, on the other hand, they have extremely sophisticated eyes. They can see UV light. A lot of flowers have UV dots and stripes and little markings on it to show butterflies and bees where to come for the nectar. So they can see that. Their antennae can smell milkweed from a mile away. So that's kind of a really cool thing. And so they don't have a nose, but they have their antennae. They can taste milkweed with their feet. Sometimes you'll see a female monarch tapping her feet on a milkweed leaf because she wants to make sure it's a milkweed leaf before she lays an egg on it. And butterflies will sip nectar. They don't eat with chewing mouth parts like the caterpillar. This is such an intriguing photo, and I've tried for many years to try and reproduce this photo. This photo was taken by another monarch raiser that I know, and she let me use this for my presentation. But this is such a cool diagram to show that there is the differences in the size between the egg and the 5th instar caterpillar. So if you look right up in the center at the top of the photo, you'll see a white dot. That's an egg. And then next to it is, to the left is a 1st instar caterpillar. Down on the right in the center is a 2nd instar caterpillar. And then right in the center is a 3rd instar caterpillar. And then the 4th instar caterpillar is on the far left. It's kind of big. And then you can see the difference between that egg and the 5th instar caterpillar down in the bottom in the center. He's absolutely enormous. It's about 1,000 times its size and weight. And they do that in 14 days. That's an amazing feat for any organism. And if a human did that, it would be the equivalent of a human baby growing to the size of a school bus in 2 weeks. So it's pretty fast, pretty large growth. So let's go over the steps of a butterfly garden. The most important thing is to have a sunny spot for your butterfly garden. You should have 6 hours or more of sun. Um, diffused light is okay, but your goal for your butterfly garden is going to grow as many flowers, as big and beautiful and as healthy as you possibly can, because that is what is actually going to feed the butterflies. And if you feed the butterflies and you feed them well, and then provide shelter for them and the host plants for their caterpillars, then they'll stick around a little bit. So you need a little bit of shelter from the wind. This butterfly garden at my house happens to be in between 2 houses. So it was very nicely sheltered from the wind, especially from the north and west. Evergreens are good shelter. Shrubs are good shelter. I have a vine in the center of this photograph. It's a sweet autumn clematis. That's really good shelter. Butterflies need somewhere where they can go to stay dry during a storm or get out of the wind during a storm. The next 2 steps are interchangeable. Grow larval or host plants for caterpillars, and then add nectar plants to feed the adult butterflies. They go hand in hand. You can have a butterfly garden without having the larval plants, without having the milkweed for the caterpillars for the monarch, without having dill for black swallowtails, or a poplar tree, or an elm or a hackberry. But if you don't have the larval plants, the butterflies will come and they'll browse from your garden, but they will leave immediately, because what they are looking for, more importantly than the nectar flowers, is that they are looking for the host plants for their caterpillars to lay the eggs on. So again, some examples of larval plants would be milkweed. There's a lot of different varieties. I'm going to go over those in a little bit. Dill, parsley, fennel for black swallowtail caterpillars, which are really beautiful caterpillars. They're really tough. They're really easy to work with. They're easy to raise if you decide you want to. They're kind of fun. And then some native trees are also some very, very good caterpillar plants. So if you have them in your neighborhood or around your property, that will just enhance the whole garden aspect. And then some examples of some really good nectar plants would be blazing star, which is liatris, which is one of our natives, coneflower, which is echinacea, also a native, and goldenrod, which is a touchy subject for some people, because if you plant the wrong one, you're a goldenrod farmer for the rest of your life. So if you put goldenrod in, it's really, really important for the migration period of the season. But if you put the wrong goldenrod in, it's going to ruin everything. So you have to put in very specific native varieties. And I'll give you a couple of those names in a minute. Butterfly bush is okay. You can put butterfly bush in, deadhead them so they don't make seeds, and you're okay. There are some older species, older cultivars, I should say, of butterfly bush that really have a hard time not seeding, and they have made a mess of California and the Carolinas. And so we want to make sure that you deadhead those butterfly bush. The newer cultivars out there do not make seeds. They're totally sterile. And then I'd say that the last plant that you absolutely should have in your garden are zinnias. Absolutely. I think a lot of people got away from growing zinnias for so long because they do have a tendency to get powdery mildew. But if you want monarch butterflies, plant the zinnias. If you're missing the butterflies, plant the zinnias, and you'll be pleased, because they'll come. Your next step is to provide a place for puddling for the male butterflies. Male butterflies need a specific mixture of salts and minerals from the earth, from the soil, in order to make them healthy to reproduce. And so they will achieve this by landing in a muddy spot. They will land on, oddly enough, they'll land on dead animals and scavenge those minerals from a dead animal. They will land on cow manure and horse manure to try and get those minerals. But you can make a puddling station in your garden by just leaving an area of bare soil and keeping it moist at all times during the summer. Now, that does not mean that you are making a pond. You are not making any kind of a structure that is going to be able to harbor mosquito larvae, because you need 8 inches or more of water, I think, for mosquito larvae. This is just a muddy spot in your garden. You can make your own puddling tray, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. So puddling is really important. If you want healthy male butterflies for mating. And then the last step of creating a butterfly garden is to avoid pesticides. If you are still using pesticides in your garden, you really need to consider and ask yourself why. Why? What is it about whatever insect it is that is coming into your garden that has you getting out there, spending money, risking your health, risking the health of everyone around you, and risking the health of the environment to get rid of this one pest? Out of all of the insects in the world, there are only 5% that are not beneficial. They can be very destructive. And usually they're only destructive to crops. We have a whole slew of insects that are destructive to trees, but there are very few insects that are so destructive to a flower garden that you would need to go out and spray your flower garden for those pests. Now, I will warn you, if you plant milkweed, no matter what species of milkweed, you're going to have the orange aphids, and those you can just spray off with a jet of water. It's as easy as that. You have to do it multiple times over the summer to keep your milkweed kind of clean, but you don't need to spray any kind of pesticide on an aphid. Even on your roses, you don't need to. Just blast them off. Butterflies will not feed on plants, and they won't come into a garden if they know it's been sprayed, if they can sense it. They just won't. They seem to have a sixth sense about that. You can start using the principles of integrated pest management, that's IPM, and you can look those steps up on your own. They're very useful when it comes to learning how to manage a garden without using pesticides. It's a really interesting way of farming. There's about 70 steps to it when you are an IPM farmer, but there's about 5 core steps for flower gardening and vegetable gardening in the home situation. So in making your habitat in your garden, so you got a garden, you've planted the plants, you want the butterflies, you're concentrating on that, you have some plants and you don't see butterflies. So what's going on? We need to probably just add a few elements into that garden and a few more specific plants to get those butterflies there to your garden. This is a shot of my garden from several years ago, and I'm actually working on replanting my garden to try and recapture this again, because this was a very, very popular spot in my garden. There's about 20 species of plants in this shot. And you can see in the back on the left-hand side is my milkweed. My common milkweed moves freely through my garden, and I encourage it, and I don't tear it out. I just let it go wherever it wants because I need it for the monarchs. Not just to feed caterpillars, but I need it to get the monarchs into my garden. And if you have never smelled common milkweed blossoms on a summer evening in early July, then you are missing out on a very, very delightful experience. It is such a beautiful thing. So with saying that, you know, you don't want just common milkweed in your garden. You need to plant with diversity in mind. Diversity is going to attract a lot of different types of insects. I noticed that several years ago, I started photographing in my garden, and mostly just the flowers, just because I was doing lectures about flower gardening. And I did start noticing a lot of different types of insects, and I really enjoyed learning about those insects. And the first time I ever saw a ladybug larva, I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know if it was a bad insect or a good insect. I had no idea. So I had to run in the house. I had to look in my bug book that I had for my nieces and nephews when they would visit my house. And sure enough, there was a ladybug larva in that book. So it's not that hard to find your insects in your garden and then to learn about them. You just need a simple bug book, usually, but I'm not going to say that every insect is in a kid's book, because there have been some that have stumped me. This is a shot of my garden from about 6 days ago, and trying to replant this garden has been quite the challenge this year, but I was really insistent on concentrating on this year and really getting those native plants back into my garden. which you can't really see many of them because they're so small. And one of those ways that I did that this year was by winter sowing. So it's a really cool way to start plants over the winter. If you guys want more information about that, maybe we'll talk to Peyton about doing a lecture. But I think someone's going to do a winter sowing lecture later on this fall for the Gabis Arboretum. All right, back to getting your habitat in order. So plant butterfly plants in containers as well as in the ground. So behind my garden, there is a sidewalk, and on that sidewalk, I have 5 very, very large planters. And in those planters, that's where I'm putting the annuals for my butterflies. You can satisfy your birds and your butterflies by putting your bird feeding stations away for the summer, or putting it on the opposite side of your house or in a different place on your property than where your butterfly garden is. Monarch butterflies don't get eaten by birds, but other butterflies and caterpillars do get eaten by birds. In fact, caterpillars are the #1 food for many, many species of bird for their chicks. On really hot days, if you have kind of an older sidewalk with some cracks and little holes in it, you can spray the pavement of your sidewalk on hot days, and butterflies will come to that, and they will sip the water out of those little cracks and holes in your sidewalk. And that's another way for those male butterflies to get those minerals that they need to reproduce. All right. You can place rocks in your garden if you don't already have them. If you have garden rocks, maybe your garden rocks just need to be moved to a nice sunny spot where it is getting the sun hitting it in the morning. Butterflies have to heat up their body to about 82 degrees first thing in the morning in order to be able to fly and feed. And so if you have rocks on the west side of your house and they're not getting hit by the morning sun, maybe that's something that you could do, is just move a couple of them or move one of them and experiment and see if you can find a good place and see if they actually are using it. Don't be too tidy with your garden in the fall. It's really important to many different species of butterfly that you leave their chrysalids in the garden for the winter, and one of those is the black swallowtail butterfly. And those, if you have dill or parsley in your garden and you're seeing that it's being eaten and the caterpillars are disappearing, caterpillars are walking away from the plant and they are going elsewhere in the garden to attach themselves to a stem to make their chrysalis. So you're not necessarily going to see a chrysalis of a black swallowtail on a dill plant. It could be 10 or 15 feet away. There is a whole generation of black swallowtail caterpillars that are growing out in gardens right now in mid to late September that will be making chrysalids, and those chrysalids have to survive until next June in order to provide the first generation for next year of black swallowtails. They usually have like 2 broods a year. And luckily their chrysalis will live here in this area over the winter, and it's the only way that this butterfly can persist in certain areas because they don't migrate. So we need the chrysalids in the garden over the winter. So don't be too tidy with your garden. It's okay. I'm giving you permission. You don't have to cut down your garden every year. You get permission now. Make a drinking station in your garden. That's the lower right-hand corner with the fruit and the butterflies on it. And I will warn you, this is a really cool thing that you can do. But make sure anytime you put a drinking station out for your butterflies that you clean it up at the end of the day, because this is exactly what raccoons and possums are looking for. So, but if you train your butterflies, if you put it out every day and in anticipation, say, of having like a garden party or something, which of course we're probably not gonna be able to do that until next year. But if you do that, then you can kind of train the butterflies in your garden to keep coming back. And there's certain species that really like to feed on rotten fruit and ripening fruit. And then you can put that out for a period of time when you're having friends over and guests over. And I think it would be really cool to have butterflies drinking out of your puddling station or your drinking station while you have guests over. It'll impress everybody. Make a puddling station. So I talked about a puddling station a little while ago, but if you don't have a spot in your garden, my garden's pretty small, my piece of property is pretty small, I don't really have a great place to make a puddling spot in the garden. because everything is very tight on my property. But I can make a puddling station in a large flower pot tray. It can be terracotta or plastic. It does not matter. It just has to hold moisture. You fill it with play sand. You don't want the sand to be very clean. And for God's sakes, don't go up to the Indiana dunes and grab a bucket of sand. And don't tell the park rangers that I told you to get it. But get play sand. And then you add a little bit of sea salt in there, or Himalayan salt, or something, salt with no iodine, and it should be high mineral content salt. And the butterflies will come to that. Moving on, get to know your butterflies that are in your small area, within your county, within your region, your immediate region. Those butterflies that will be visiting that part of your county, region, or whatever, they will have specific plants that they really, really like. And the more you get to know what plants they really like, and it's not just the host plants for their caterpillars, it's going to be other things like with monarch butterflies. I've said it before today, if you plant zinnias, they will come. If you plant common milkweed, they will come. But if you plant zinnias, they will definitely come. It's an amazing little element to add to your garden, but for some reason, monarch butterflies really love zinnias. I don't think it's a big mystery though, because zinnias are native to Mexico. And as the butterflies are migrating down and out of Mexico, they probably do encounter quite a few of them. And then limiting yellow jackets and other big nasty wasps in your garden is going to be really beneficial too. You're going to find that to be very beneficial. Wasps will come and steal caterpillars because they're meat eaters. They take the caterpillars back to their nests for their young. And you can hang a wasp deterrent device like this thing in this picture down in the center of the screen. And the device that I use to keep the wasps out of my garden is called a waspinator. And it has worked for 6 years. And this year was the first time I had a wasp nest in my garden. And they made a nest in my birdhouse gourd that I had hanging in my garden. So I have to get rid of that birdhouse gourd. But I'm very pleased at how that wasp device has worked, 6 years running. So they worked so well that we started hanging them at the park district where I work, where we have kids outdoors for day camp, and at the pools in the concession areas. They have worked really well to just keep the number of yellow jackets low. You know, yellow jackets are just out there. They're everywhere. They're super common. But it keeps them from making a nest because they think that is a bald-faced hornet nest, and they're enemies of bald-faced hornets. The bald-faced hornets will eat yellow jackets, I should say. Okay, butterfly flowers. There are 2 types of butterfly flowers you need in a butterfly garden, and that's host and nectar plants. So again, the host plants are for the caterpillars, nectar plants are for the butterflies. Their preferences are daisies, tubular flowers, and then clusters of small flowers like the yarrow in this photo. For monarch butterflies, their color preferences in order are purple, yellow, pink, white, and orange. It's really a very weird thing. Now, what color is not on that list? There's 2 colors not on that list. Blue and red. So red are for hummingbirds and blue is for bees. So planting red and purple tubular flowers are a great love of hummingbirds. And then small, tiny blue, white, and pale pink flowers are for bees. And then if you mix all of them together, you're going to have a really healthy ecosystem in your garden for all different kinds of insects and birds. All right, the must-have plant list. When I first started butterfly gardening, I planted the plants that were on butterfly gardening lists in books that I was reading, and I wasn't getting any butterflies, and I wasn't getting any caterpillars, and I didn't see any eggs, and I did not know what I was doing for the first couple of years. I was really having trouble, and I finally found a guru, because everybody needs a guru. And I talked to my friend Bob, and I said, you know, why don't I see so many butterflies at home? I see butterflies at work. I see them in the parks. I don't know. I said, I just can't make the connection. What am I missing? And he said, well, you need the must-have plant list. And I said, okay, what's that? And he said, butterfly bush, purple coneflower, lantana, Mexican sunflower, zinnia, verbena bonariensis, which is Brazilian verbena, and then milkweed. So these 7 plants plus the milkweed, or 6 plants plus the milkweed, are what can really make a good basic butterfly garden. Now, granted, 4 of these plants on this list are annuals, but I don't think that matters because they're super easy plants to grow from seed, except for lantana. Lantana is the only one on this list that I would buy every year. The other ones are super easy to grow. Again, with buddleia, make sure you deadhead it. Down below the butterfly bush is echinacea. That's purple coneflower. It is one of our natives. Now, you might like the coneflower that has all the interesting colors that are the new hybrids, but they are not 100% hardy in our area. So maybe up by the lake in Porter and Michigan City and LaPorte and those areas closest to the lake. You guys are zone 6 closest to the lake. But if you're away from the lake at all, they're really hard to keep over the winter. So I would suggest to, if you like those, plant them for yourself, plant them for your eyes, make them for eye candy for you. But plant the echinacea that is our native or close to our native, like Magnus. It's one of my favorite cultivars out there. It's only 1 step away from the native, genetically speaking. And they will enjoy those the most. And then you have a really good food source for yellow finches also. Those hybrid echinacea that are very colorful, they don't generally make seeds. They're pretty sterile. Okay, lantana is pretty self-explanatory. 2 things you need to know about lantana though. If you put it on the ground, the hummingbirds won't go to it. If you put it in a hanging basket, the butterflies won't go to it. That's a very, very weird observation that I've made it in the past couple of years. So if you want hummingbirds and butterflies going to lantana, you need to have a hanging basket and a couple in a pot near the ground or in the ground. Tithonia is the daisy, the orange daisy in the lower right-hand corner. It's a very innocuous looking photo of an orange daisy. However, if you've ever grown Mexican sunflower, you know, it grows 5 to 6 feet tall and it grows 4 to 5 feet wide. It is an enormous annual plant. It is extraordinary how fast this plant grows in one season. And the great thing about it is that it starts blooming at the end of July and it blooms straight through to October until the frost kills it. It's super easy to collect the seeds and to grow a new one for the next year. The plant itself is kind of hard to find in a garden center because, and I used to work in the garden center industry, and we would never carry it in the garden centers I worked at because it didn't bloom until July. And so no one really, when people are buying flowers in a garden center in the spring, they want flowers on the plant already. And so we would always say it looks like a dog in the pot. So I have plenty of seeds. We have to find some way for me to be able to distribute seeds since I'm doing multiple Zoom lectures this fall. Maybe the Porter County Seed Exchange might happen in January, and I do supply lots of seeds to that, of these kinds of seeds for the flower gardens. So hopefully be able to do that. Again, zinnia, totally awesome. It really doesn't matter what kind of zinnia you grow, as long as it is a zinnia like this one. This is Zowie. And like this one, I mean a non-pom-pom type of zinnia. You can see that the 3 daisy type plants that I have in these photos on this page specifically are single layer or semi-double flowers. If you start planting flowers that are like pom-pom type flowers that have multiple layers of petals, the multiple layers of petals make it very difficult for the insects or the hummingbirds to get to the nectar. So keep that in mind when you're choosing seeds or you're choosing plants. The plant in the top left right-hand corner is Verbena bonariensis, and that is Brazilian verbena, and that is a really terrific annual flower that can reseed in your garden very easily, but it's not a pest. It's a very skinny, tall, stringy looking plant that is meant to grow in between other plants. If it grows in a place where you don't want it, you just pull it out. There's almost no root system to it. It's amazing. This plant has such a small root system. So let it reseed around your garden. Have it every year. It's absolutely a gorgeous color of lavender, and every butterfly and bee in the neighborhood is going to be on it and benefiting from it. Okay, a few other butterfly flowers. I just want to go through this list very quickly because I want to talk about natives more importantly. In the top left-hand corner, that's actually a peony. And our peony is our state flower, and the peony that everyone thinks of when they think of our state flower is the, you know, multiple petaled pom-pom type again. But there are peonies out there that are semi-double and single flowers that look like this pink one that I have. This is Coral Charm. And the thing about these is that they're good fodder for bumblebees that are coming out in the spring. So bumblebees will be out before the peonies, but it is good food for the peonies, or for the bumblebees, sorry. In the center is Jupiter's Beard, kind of an old-fashioned cottage garden plant. Easy to find in some garden centers, easy to grow from seed. Again, it's kind of like Verbena bonariensis. It's small clusters of flowers. Butterflies and bees love that. It blooms all season long. It's really easy to grow. It's kind of a short-lived perennial, but I don't shrink back from short-lived perennials, because if it only lives, 4 or 5 years, then I can either replant it if I want, gather seeds and regrow it, or I can try something different. So if you get 5 years out of it, that's pretty good for that plant. Flax, any flax, native flax, non-native flax, all good. Bees love them. Bumblebees like them. Butterflies will go to them occasionally, but hummingbirds really like flax. Down in the bottom left-hand corner is Ageratum, Blue Horizon. And most of the time when we think of Ageratum, we think of the Ageratum in the garden center that's only like 4 inches tall. This Ageratum is really cool because it's 2.5 feet tall. So it's a really interesting landscape plant. It can fill in a really nice area in the landscape with just one plant. And bumblebees and butterflies both like it a lot. I've grown it for many, many years in the parks, at the park district. I've grown it from seed, I've grown it from cuttings, from my own plants, and I have bought them in also. And it's just an absolutely beautiful plant. In the center is catmint, not catnip, but catmint. This is Nepeta. And then its cousin is calamintha. Both of these plants are small, low to the ground, thousands of flowers. Calamintha is traditionally kind of a light lavender to white. Catmint is almost always this purple color. They're really drought tolerant plants. They bloom for an obscene amount of time during the summer. And they're extremely popular with honeybees, tiny native bees like mason bees and other tiny little natives, and then some bumblebees. So it's not so much of a butterfly plant, but I always want to call attention to the Nepeta and calamintha because I don't think enough people know about, especially the calamintha. It's kind of a new thing on the market in the last 5 years. Next to that is our good old sedum, Live Forever. That's Autumn Joy. You kind of see it everywhere. But it is a really good butterfly plant. It's not a popular plant with monarchs, but if you have ever been in the presence of migrating American ladies and painted lady butterflies, they love this plant, and they love New England asters. So those are 2 really important plants for painted ladies. There are more butterflies that migrate than just the monarch. There's about 10 species total in our area. They don't migrate as far as the monarch does to Mexico, but they do migrate. Some natives for butterflies that I've had really good success with at work and at home are Joe Pieweed down in the bottom left, Rattlesnake Master up in the top in the middle, that white flower. Such a beautiful plant. The purple coneflower again, and there are other species of echinacea that are also equally as pretty for your home, like Echinacea pallida. That's a beautiful native plant, very easy to grow from seed. It's got an interesting long taproot once it gets established. And it doesn't have as many flowers as purple coneflower, but it is a really cool coneflower. And then Monarda. The photo is of a native Monarda, but actually it doesn't matter what kind of Monarda you grow for bumblebees and hummingbirds alike and some butterflies. It doesn't matter. A cultivar or the native. Monarda is very popular and it's full of nectar. These are natives on this slide that are late bloomers that are important for the monarch migration. Again, when the butterflies are migrating from Canada through the Midwest and down into Mexico, there are two food sources that are most common is New England aster and goldenrod. There's a few things that trigger the migration in Canada in the beginning of August, and that's the daylight shortens, the New England asters start to bloom, and the temperature changes. So those three things in conjunction really help get the migration moving. And then the butterflies are following the bloom line of the New England aster and the goldenrod all the way down through to Texas. So they are at the head of that bloom line. So as far as the goldenrod goes, I like showy goldenrod for home garden, and I like rigid goldenrod for home garden. And I think this photo is of rigida. Below it is New England aster. New England aster is a terrific plant. It does grow about 4 feet tall, so you got to be prepared. And it is a plant that I usually suggest people to treat just like they treat phlox, meaning thin out the stems in the spring to make air circulation in your colony of plants, because you don't want them to get powdery mildew. New England aster is also an easy plant to reseed in your garden. It's an easy plant to collect seeds from to share with people. And since I'm basically a seed monger, I'm always thinking about seeds, always. In the center is Liatris spicata. So this is just regular prairie blazing star. So this one is the same as cobalt, which is the variety of Liatris that is in every garden center in the United States. However, there's 11 species of Liatris that are indigenous to our region. That's a lot. But meadow blazing star, Liatris ligulastylis, is the most important to the monarch butterfly. It's blooming right now out in the prairies. It's blooming in the gardens where I planted at work. It's not blooming in my garden here yet because my seedlings are only from this winter. So they'll bloom next year. But ligulastylis has flowers that are slightly different than this one. It's more of like a big button of purple, soft purple petals. They're spaced out along the plant a little bit. And the flower scapes are like 5 feet tall. So it's a big plant. Got to be prepared for that one. That and cup plant. You got to be prepared for cup plant. If you don't give cup plant a good 10-foot circumference, it's going to encroach in on everything around it. And that's the flower that's in the bottom right-hand corner is cup plant. Cup plant is cool because the leaves grow around the stem and they collect water. So it's a good water source for little things like honeybees and wasps and hummingbirds. There's dew in there and rainwater every morning. And the flowers are popular. I don't ever see tiger swallowtails in my garden until my cup plant is blooming in July, which I always find really interesting. They really like this plant very much. And then I see all kinds of them. This year, not as many as other years, but I did see quite a few this year. And then the top plant in the right-hand corner is ironweed, Vernonia. Ironweed blooms a little bit before the migration starts, but it is an important late season flower. Super easy to grow. Again, it's kind of a big plant. So the thing about native plants is that a lot of them are pretty big, but they can be easily incorporated into a conventional garden with ease. You just have to plan it a little bit, give them a little bit more space, be prepared for the fact that they might be 4 feet tall. Don't try and restrict them. But for people who don't know a whole lot about native plants, I usually tell them, you know, just because you're going to put a few native plants into your garden at home doesn't mean that your garden is going to start looking like a wild prairie when you do that. And if you really think about a prairie anyway, a prairie is not a wild, unruly growing space. A prairie is a very intricate, well-organized matrix of organisms that work together to live. And so don't be afraid of natives, I guess is the bottom line. All right, as far as milkweed goes, again, lots and lots of choice for milkweed in this area. In North America, we have over 100 species. In Illinois and Indiana, we have 24 species. Out of that 24 species, we have 12 that monarchs will lay their eggs on. Here I have 5 that are very good plants for the home garden. One of them is an annual. So let's start with common milkweed down in the bottom. Common milkweed can spread. You saw it in my photograph I showed you earlier. It loves to spread. My theory that I have not, seen any research on yet, my theory is that it's a very nutrient hungry plant. And I think it moves around from place to place because it uses up all the nutrients in one area and it needs to continuously look for new nutrients. And so it's moving around the garden. Common milkweed, some people call it a thug. Some people don't like it. Some people call it invasive. Technically, it can't be an invasive plant because it's native, but it can be aggressive. We can call it aggressive. Common milkweed can be grown in 5-gallon buckets or big pots and be cut down and put into the garage for over the winter. If you don't want it in your garden, that's fine. It does work. I did it last winter to prove what I've been telling people for years. My milkweed grew very well and brought it out in the spring and it sprouted just fine. You need to water it a couple times over the winter. Just a couple of cups of water a couple of times over the winter to keep the roots from totally drying out and dying. But if you don't want to put it in the ground, you can put it in the pots. You need to be able to grow it keep it growing year to year in a pot so that it can mature, so that it will actually grow into a plant that's going to be big enough to have flowers in 4 years. Usually it takes 4 years to mature so that you can actually attract the monarchs. Above it in the photos is prairie milkweed, Asclepias sullivantii. And this is a really good, well-behaved cousin to common milkweed. Prairie milkweed, I have it in a couple of places of the Park District. It doesn't spread as fast or as far as common milkweed, and it's shorter. It's only about 30 inches tall. So it's a really good alternative if you're looking for a milkweed plant for the landscape. Prairie milkweed is not commercially available in garden centers yet, but you can order starter plants from places like Prairie Nursery and Prairie Moon. And I get my seeds every year from Prairie Moon, and they're extremely easy to grow by seed. Again, I winter sow all of these milkweeds. I grow 12 species of milkweeds every year, and all of them winter sow very well. Swamp milkweed is in the bottom in the middle, and swamp milkweed is probably one of the best ones for the home garden if you're looking for a caterpillar plant because it doesn't spread. It makes a small colony, it makes a small group. It puts on a stem a year for about 5 years. You'll have a nice big robust plant at about year 5, and then after year 5 it starts to shrink and then it disappears. The good thing about swamp milkweed is that its seeds germinate readily in the garden. So it will start to spread around the garden and it'll spread itself out. So every year you will always have a fresh new swamp milkweed plant somewhere in your garden if you allow the seeds to fall or blow around. If it goes somewhere where you don't want it, in its first year, it's extremely easy to pull up, dig out, and to transplant or to pot up and give away. Butterfly weed is probably most people's gateway native plant in the Midwest, I think. It is readily available in garden centers. When I first bought butterfly weed 20 years ago, I had no idea it was a native, none at all. But I was pleasantly surprised when I did find out that it was a native and it was a milkweed to boot because I found caterpillars on it. You don't find caterpillars on butterfly weed very often. but it does happen in the end of the season when all the other milkweed has aphids. The butterfly weed is going to be pretty clean, and the monarchs will lay eggs on it. Above it is tropical milkweed. This is Asclepias quersavica. This is native to Central America. You can grow it as an annual here. I grow it in the ground at work. I grow it in pots at work. And here at my house, I grow it in pots. And this is mostly what I collect my eggs off of for my caterpillars that I'm raising. I usually have about 25 pots of it around my house. And then I collect the seeds by putting these little bags over the seed pods. And then it starts looking like a weird farm. My neighbors think I'm nuts, I think. But I need the seeds because I give the seeds away. So if you don't have milkweed in your garden yet, I encourage you to find some type of milkweed. There's a lot of other types of milkweed. If you go on the Prairie Moon or the Prairie Nursery website, they'll have all the native milkweeds in the area, and it will tell you what kind of soil you need for the specific types of milkweeds. But I'll tell you what, right now, if you look in the dead center of this photo, this is why I grow milkweed. I grow milkweed because I get to see that in my garden. I get to see caterpillars hiding in my milkweed flowers, and that's what I want to see. I want to see them living and breeding and doing their thing in my garden. So get on it, plant some milkweed. All right, Monarch way stations are a great way for you to be able to record your garden with a worthy organization that is Monarch Watch. They are keeping track of monarch gardens all over the United States, in Mexico and Canada. There are 29,809 monarch way stations as of the beginning of September. This map, the photo of this map is from 2018 though, so I have to update it. But the number 29,000 is updated. My garden number is 4,552, and that was from 2011. So we've come a long way in 9 years, when the people at Monarch Watch just wanted to get 10,000 monarch way stations in the US. And then in 2011 or 2014, when the monarchs started going through the process for the Endangered Species Act, the education world for monarch butterflies and for habitat blew up. And so that is why we have so many monarch way stations registered. And they're not the only place you can register your butterfly garden. You can register your butterfly garden in lots of different places. Even Wild Ones has a garden registry. So a way station is a specialized pollinator garden. It has to be of a certain size. You have to have native milkweeds for monarchs. They like you to have more than one species of native milkweed. That's why I'm growing like 12 species of milkweed every year. Stick a couple in every year. You have to have nectar plants to feed the actual adult butterflies and other pollinators. You have to have shelter, so you need to have trees and shrubs nearby. And you have to have water for the mud puddling. And then you can order a sign for your garden and put it out there. I've got a sign out in my garden, and proudly fly those colors. It's a worthy organization. Monarch Watch is a worthy organization because of all of the education that they put on, but also all the research they've been doing since 1994. It's been pretty incredible what they have learned. I'd say that the majority of what we've learned about monarchs has been from Monarch Watch and from Dr. Lincoln Brower from the university in Florida. I think it was, I can't remember the university that Dr. Lincoln was at. But how do we get more milkweed? We get more milkweed because we go out and we gather seeds. This is the seed pods from all 65 of my stems from about 4 years ago. And I dry them, I clean them. Cleaning it is a real pain in the butt. And then I distribute those seeds every time I go to a lecture and to the Porter County Seed Exchange every year. So other places that you can go for more information, Monarch Watch is a great place for information. Pollinator Partnership is fantastic. The Monarch Joint Venture is a fantastic organization. Monarch Joint Venture has wonderful education publications if you want to learn specific things about growing a garden for monarchs, from growing a garden to information about the actual monarch butterfly, to how do we discuss roadside mowing with our county and with farmers to be able to mow at the right time of the year so we're not destroying monarch habitat that is on the roadsides in the rural areas. So there's a lot of education there on Monarch Joint Venture. It gives you a lot of good ways to talk to people about monarchs and their issues. Monarch Lab is a great organization from the University of Minnesota. And then North American Butterfly Association has a lot of good info too. And Journey North. Journey North is a really interesting organization that would like you to register your sightings of butterflies, eggs, monarchs, caterpillars, and chrysalids all during the whole year. And you can join that for free. It's online, and it's a cool organization too. You can go on Journey North today, and you can see where the monarch migration is today. People put up their notifications of where they've seen monarchs, and you can follow that on a live map. A couple of other things that you can do. You can, other than register your garden as a monarch way station, you can certify with the National Wildlife Foundation Association. You can register your garden with Wild Ones. You can register your garden with the Monarch Joint Venture, the Pollinator Partnership. Get involved in these organizations. Volunteer in your community. Volunteer for Wild Ones. The only Wild Ones chapter in all of the state of Indiana is in Hammond at Gibson Woods, and I've been a member for about 20 years, and it's a really excellent organization. We have a wonderful plant sale every spring. We're involved in flower garden planting and maintaining gardens at a couple of different places for people to be able to see, for the public to see. So there are places to go and volunteer to encourage more people to get involved with monarchs. So Peyton, how about if we address some questions? Peyton.
Yep, sorry, I was checking the chat. So if anyone has any questions, you can unmute yourself or and ask it, or leave it in the chat and we'll answer. Any questions?
I have a question. What about ordering butterflies online? I noticed they sell eggs at some places. Is that a environmentally good thing to do?
I don't think so, because you don't know the provenance of where those eggs are coming from.
Right.
They could be coming from monarch butterflies at a butterfly farm that are just consistently interbred. Now, I do know that Monarch Watch does sell some eggs and larvae for classrooms, and that's probably the only place that I would trust. But I would feel more comfortable if you were interested in having caterpillars and trying out, you know, just raising a few caterpillars. If you plant milkweed and plant some of those annuals that I suggested, then you will get some eggs. You'll see some caterpillars next year.
Okay.
Probably the biggest challenge though is if you don't collect the eggs when you see them, if you come back even a few hours later, it's probably not going to be there because a spider is going to come by and eat it. So, and that was one of the reasons why I started taking in eggs and not waiting for caterpillars. So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
But it's better to collect them off of your own milkweed. Anything else?
Okay, well, I'll be sending this video out to everyone so you guys can go back and watch it. And then if you have any other questions after, feel free to email the Gabis Arboretum email, and I'd be happy to, reach out to Dolly, and if you have any questions, get them answered. So
yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions for now? Jennifer, do you have a question?
I just wanted to say it was very helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
All right, awesome. Thank you guys so much. Oh, and Dolly did mention that there was a winter sowing. Yeah, we will be offering a winter sowing program in I believe it's in November 14th. And you can find more information about that on our website. So, yes, okay. Let's see. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you guys are able to get outside and enjoy the nice weather for today.
Thank you very much. Really interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good day, everybody.
You too.
All right, everyone have a great day.